When I was 7, I was diagnosed with a rare form of childhood schizophrenia. At least, that's what my parents told me. I never saw the paperwork, never met the doctor. But I believed them, because what else was I supposed to do? They said I had episodes, that I would black out and become violent, that once I threw a plate across the room at my mom, that I pushed my cousin down the stairs, that I stared at my little sister for hours without blinking. I didn't remember any of it. But when I said that, my mom would smile sadly and say, "That's part of it, sweetheart. You forget what you do." Then she'd cry and say she was scared of me. And that broke me every time. They said I had to take my pills every morning, and if I skipped even once, I might hurt someone again. That I was dangerous, that I was broken. They even kept a small locked cabinet in the kitchen labeled emergency meds, like I was a ticking time bomb. The pills made me foggy. I remember trying to read a book for school and not being able to get past the second page. My mom would pat my head and say, "That's okay, honey. We'll get you through this. Just trust us." So I did. For years. I stayed inside. I avoided people. I kept my thoughts to myself because I didn't trust my own mind. Even when I was calm, even when I felt normal, I'd look in the mirror and wonder, what if I snap? What if I'm a monster and don't even know it? Once I found a photo album with pictures from when I was little, birthday parties, sleepovers, Halloween costumes with my cousins. I asked why we didn't do those things anymore. My dad said, "You changed." My mom said, "We're just trying to keep you safe." At school, kids whispered about me. One girl said her mom told her not to sit next to me in class. Another kid asked if I heard voices. I started wondering if I did. And so I shrank. I lived quietly, obediently, fearfully, a ghost in my own life. But on my 22nd birthday, everything fell apart. I asked for my medical records. My mom panicked. My dad told me to drop it. So I didn't. And what I found next shattered the only reality I'd ever known. There was no doctor, no diagnosis, no condition. My parents had made it all up. When you're a kid, your world is only as big as your parents let it be. Mine was about 800 square feet and full of fear. I wasn't allowed to sleep over at friends' houses. Wasn't allowed to play outside unless one of them watched from the window. I couldn't go to birthday parties, field trips, or even sit with other kids at lunch after 3rd grade. Your brain can't handle stimulation, Mom would say. Too much excitement might trigger you. I didn't know what trigger meant at the time. I just knew it meant no. My room became my entire world. It had a small bed, a single window with blinds always drawn, and a bookshelf filled with safe books, mostly animal stories and picture books, even when I was 10. Anything more advanced might confuse me, Mom said. There was a lock on the outside of my bedroom door. They said it was just in case. But once, when I had a nightmare and tried to go to their room, the door wouldn't open. I cried for 10 minutes until they unlocked it. Dad looked ashamed. Mom looked satisfied. At 10, they installed a camera in my room. "It's not because we don't trust you," Mom said. "It's for your safety, so we can see if anything starts to go wrong." She said it like she was proud of me, like I had a serious condition that required constant monitoring. I stopped changing clothes in my room after that. I'd go into the bathroom and lock the door. They didn't like that either. I had a few friends early on. There was Jonah, who lived 2 houses down. He liked dinosaurs and building forts. But one day, Jonah's mom knocked on our door and said Jonah came home crying. "Your son stared at him and wouldn't speak for 10 minutes, she said. "He's terrified." I had no idea what she was talking about. I remembered we were playing cards. After that, Jonah wasn't allowed to come over. That night, I asked Mom, did I really do that? She gave me a long hug. "You don't remember?" I shook my head. "That's okay, honey. It means the medicine is helping. You're safe now." I didn't feel safe. I felt confused, ashamed. I cried myself to sleep. I was homeschooled starting at age 12. The official reason was that I had an episode in art class. Apparently, I drew something violent and disturbing. When I asked to see the drawing, Mom said she'd thrown it away. That seemed to happen a lot. Stories I couldn't confirm, memories I didn't have. She kept a notebook called Behavior Journal. Every day she would write things like, "Didn't smile at breakfast. Was quiet too long. Looked angry when I took his phone." Sometimes I'd peek at it when she was in the shower. There were pages and pages of my supposed symptoms. By 13, I wasn't allowed outside alone. I once tried walking to the end of the street and my mom chased after me barefoot, screaming like I was escaping an asylum. The neighbors stared. She told them I had a neurological condition. At 14, they blocked every app on my phone except for one educational math game and a weather app. "Even small amounts of social pressure can cause relapse," she said. At 15, I asked about getting a pet. She laughed. "You can't even take care of yourself." There were no holidays in our house. My 10th birthday, my mom made me sit quietly for reflections. She lit one candle and said, "Think about what you've overcome," then handed me a plastic watch that didn't work. "You need to learn structure," she said. "No cake, no singing, just quiet, always quiet." My dad rarely said much. He went to work early, came home late, but sometimes I'd see him watching me with this sadness, like he wanted to say something, but didn't dare. Once I asked him, "Do you think I'm dangerous?" He hesitated, then said, "No, but your mom worries, and she knows more than I do." That answer haunted me for years. I learned to be silent, to agree, to take the pills and nod when they told me I was fragile, ill, unpredictable. I didn't believe them, not deep down, but I didn't trust myself enough to fight it. I was just a kid, and they were my whole world, until college came, and cracks began to show. By the time I was 13, I had already given up on the idea of being normal. I had no real friends. I hadn't been inside another kid's house in years. If someone waved at me on the street, I'd flinch. If someone laughed in class, I assumed it was about me, because most of the time it was. I was still allowed to attend public school in 7th grade, but only for part-time classes. A counselor would pick me up halfway through the day and take me home for stabilization. That's what they called it. Stabilization time. No one ever explained what I was stabilizing from. At school, kids whispered. Some said I had the rage disease. One boy asked me if I had killed anyone yet. I started eating lunch in a storage closet by the gym. The janitor let me stay as long as I didn't make noise. When I was 14, I developed an interest in space. I found an old astronomy book at the library and spent hours reading it in my room. I told my mom I wanted to visit the planetarium downtown. She stared at me for a long time, then said, "People like you don't do well in crowds." She took the book away and replaced it with a children's coloring book about emotions. "Color the sad face blue," she told me. I was 14. That year I began writing letters, not to anyone, just to release something. "Dear future me, do you remember what stars look like? Have you ever kissed someone? Did you ever learn what it's like to be hugged without being studied?" I kept them hidden under my mattress, until the day I came home and they were gone. My mom didn't mention them, but that night she gave me an extra pill. At 15, I asked to see my therapist, a woman I supposedly had been visiting since age 8. I realized I had no memory of her, no face, no voice, no office, just mentions of her. "Dr. Patterson says you're improving. Dr. Patterson increased your dose." So I said, "Can I meet her again? I don't remember what she looks like." My mom hesitated. She moved to another state. We're between providers. I asked, "So who's prescribing my meds?" She got angry. "You don't need to know that. You're getting better, and that's what matters." But I didn't feel better. I felt like I was slowly drowning in syrup. Thick, sweet, numbing. I couldn't focus, couldn't sleep without nightmares, couldn't even cry. One night, I stayed up until 3 a.m. Googling schizophrenia symptoms on my school laptop. Hallucinations, delusions, paranoia, word salad, catatonia. I didn't have any of those. Not even close. I opened Reddit, typed, "Can you be misdiagnosed with schizophrenia by your parents?" Deleted it. Typed it again. Deleted it again. Then I closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling for hours. At 16, I had my first panic attack. Not because I was mentally ill, but because I realized for the first time that I might not be. And that was terrifying. Because if I wasn't mentally ill, then everything I had lived through was abuse. That same year, my dad got drunk at Thanksgiving, the only holiday we kind of acknowledged, and told me, if it were up to me, you'd be in school like everybody else. Then he fell asleep on the couch and never mentioned it again. At 17, I met someone online. His name was Eli. He lived in Oregon. He liked art and old horror movies. We started chatting through an anonymous board about vintage posters. He said, "You seem really smart. Where do you go to school?" I hesitated. "I'm homeschooled." He said, "Cool." I was 2, until 10th grade. Then asked, "Do you want to video chat sometime?" My heart pounded. I said, "I can't. My condition makes me light sensitive." That was a lie. The truth was, if my mom caught me, she'd say I was seeking outside validation. She had used that phrase before. One day, Eli asked, "Do you think you're really sick?" I didn't respond for 2 hours. When I finally did, I wrote, "I don't know, but I don't feel free." That same week, my mom found our chat history. She screamed so loud that the neighbors called the police. When the officers came, she told them I was having a psychotic break, that I'd endangered myself online, spoken to strangers, disassociated. I sat on the couch shaking. One of the officers asked me calmly, "Are you okay?" I nodded. He said, "Do you feel like hurting yourself or anyone else?" I said, "No." He paused, then looked at my mom. "Well, then we don't see any reason to escalate. He seems pretty grounded to me." That was the first time anyone ever questioned her. The look in her eyes scared me more than anything else in my life, like a cornered animal. That night, I started hiding things. I created a secret Gmail, saved screenshots of texts, took pictures of my pill bottles. I didn't know what I was building, only that someday I might need it. College was my first breath of air in a life that felt like slow suffocation. I was still forced to live at home, for safety reasons, of course. But just walking on a campus made me feel like I had crossed into another dimension. No one looked at me like I was dangerous. No one flinched when I spoke. My professors treated me like a student, not a patient, and slowly that started to change how I saw myself. One day, I forgot to take my morning pills. I panicked. I waited for the fog, the rage, the blackout. Something. Nothing happened. I sat in class, took notes, ate lunch. The world didn't end. No one died. I didn't scream or hallucinate or throw anything. That night, I told my mom I had taken the pills. She smiled and said, "See, you're getting better." But I knew I hadn't. So I skipped the next day. Still nothing. Then I skipped the rest of the week. By Friday, I felt awake. My thoughts were clearer. My hands didn't shake. I actually laughed out loud in class. I couldn't remember the last time that had happened. I started writing again, not letters, just thoughts, ideas, a list titled Things I Wasn't Allowed to Want. It included a telescope, a hoodie that isn't beige, privacy, someone to call me by my name without fear in their eyes. That weekend, I did something terrifying. I asked my mom for my medical records. Her face drained of color. She said, "Why do you want those?" "I'm applying for a campus disability accommodation," I lied. "They need documentation." She hesitated. "They should just contact me. I've always spoken to your providers." I nodded, but something cracked inside me. The next day, while she was at the store, I looked through the family filing cabinet. I found my birth certificate, old report cards, a receipt for a broken dishwasher. No medical files, no diagnosis, no doctor visits past age 6. So I dug deeper. I called the clinic I'd supposedly been diagnosed at, gave my full name, date of birth, everything. After a moment of silence, the woman on the phone said, "I'm sorry, we don't have any patient history under that name." I thanked her, hung up, then sat in my car and stared at the dashboard for 15 minutes. My heart was racing, but I wasn't scared. I was angry. For the first time in my life, I had a real solid answer. They lied. I tried a second clinic, same result. Third one, nothing. I checked my insurance history online, or tried to. There was no record of psychiatric services billed to our plan. I decided to stop taking my meds completely. The first week was hard. Not because of withdrawal, but because I kept waiting to break. Kept expecting the monster they warned me I was to come out, but never did. I started seeing things in color again, not literally, but emotionally. The world had been beige for years. Muted. Foggy. Now it was full of sharp edges, raw thoughts, painful but real. I felt human. Then I found the video. One day, while organizing backup folders on our old family desktop, I opened a mislabeled file titled vacation_packing_2014.mov. It wasn't vacation footage. It was my mom, standing in the kitchen, holding the phone to her ear, speaking in a calm, professional voice. "Yes, he's doing well. We've kept him stable with the current regimen. Yes, same dosage. No hallucinations since February. Right, we'll continue documenting. Thank you, doctor." Then she hung up, paused, then turned to the fridge and laughed. No one else was in the room. I rewound it 3 times. There was no one on the call. The phone screen was black. She was rehearsing. Or pretending. Or both. I started saving everything. Screenshots, emails, the video. My class notes showing improved concentration off meds. Even voice memos where I whispered what I discovered into my phone like it was a confessional booth. I made backups, flash drives, cloud folders under fake names. Part of me was terrified she'd find it all. Part of me wanted her to. That week, I'd overheard her on the phone with a neighbor. "His symptoms are better, thank God. We've adjusted the dose again. You just never stop being a mom, you know." I nearly vomited. I scheduled an independent psychiatric evaluation at a hospital downtown. Didn't tell her. The intake nurse was kind. She asked real questions, didn't look at me like I was glass. The doctor met with me 3 times over 2 weeks. He ran tests, asked about my history. He noticed things, how I avoided eye contact, how I flinched when he raised his hand to gesture. At the final meeting, he said, "I don't see evidence of schizophrenia or psychosis. What you see is long-term trauma, possibly emotional abuse." I didn't cry. I just sat there, silent, because I already knew. But hearing it confirmed felt like being reborn and stabbed in the heart at the same time. The folder was thin, maybe a dozen pages. It had my name on it, but it felt foreign, like I was looking at someone else's story. At the top was the psychiatrist's final summary. No evidence of schizophrenia, psychosis, or other delusional disorders. Signs of chronic emotional suppression, possible prolonged psychological manipulation. Strong recommendation, remove patient from triggering environment. That last sentence hit me the hardest. Triggering environment. My home. My parents. I took the bus home with the folder clutched to my chest like a secret. My hands were shaking. I got off a stop early, walked the rest of the way. I needed time to think. What now? What do you do when the only reality you've ever known collapses? When I opened the front door, my mom was in the kitchen. She smiled. How was class? I stared at her for several seconds. I felt the folder in my backpack like it was on fire. Fine, I said. That night, I snuck into the attic. It was dusty, cramped, a place I rarely went, but something told me to look. Behind an old suitcase, I found a white plastic storage bin. Inside, bottles. Dozens of them. Most had no labels. Others had faded stickers, some vitamin brands, others generic supplements. I opened one and found expired Tylenol. Another, children's chewable gummies. And some I didn't recognize at all. I took photos of everything. Documented every bottle, every expiry date, every lot number. Then I found the notebooks. 5 of them, leather-bound, each dated and organized. They were filled with logs like, didn't speak during breakfast, pause early stage episode, laugh during TV, slight mania, avoided eye contact, monitor. Hundreds of pages of symptoms. Most of them were normal behavior. Sometimes I was sick with a cold. Other times I just didn't want to talk. But there it all was rewritten as pathology. There were even sketches, graphs of my mood swings, rating systems for my tone of voice. She had made me a character in her personal medical fantasy. I flipped through until I found something worse. Fake medical letters, designed with Microsoft Word. Some still had formatting instructions accidentally left in. Insert logo here. Adjust font before printing. One even had the wrong birth year, said I was born in 1995 instead of 1996. Another spelled my name wrong. I sat in the attic for 2 hours just turning pages. Some part of me kept thinking I'd find a real document. Something to justify it. Something to make sense of the last 15 years. I didn't. I brought everything to my room, scanned every page. Saved it in triplicate. One USB in my sock drawer, one in my backpack, one at Ellie's. Yes, we were still talking. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, remembering all the things I thought were my fault. The missed parties, the episodes, the fear in my teacher's eyes, the pills, the camera, the whispers. None of it had been real. Or rather, it had been deliberately unreal. I confronted my dad first. I waited until Mom was out getting groceries, sat him down at the kitchen table. He was drinking tea. I placed the psychiatrist's report in front of him. He didn't speak for nearly a full minute. Then he whispered, "I always wondered." I stared at him. "You wondered." "I thought she knew best," he said quietly. "She said it was under control, said you were too fragile to understand." She said a lot of things. I snapped, and you believed all of them. His hand trembled. I just didn't want to fight. That sentence shattered something in me. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood up, walked away. That evening, I told my mom I had scheduled a follow-up appointment with a new doctor. She panicked. "Why? You've been stable lately. We don't want to disrupt that." I said nothing. She followed me into the hallway. "Is someone putting thoughts in your head again?" That phrase, putting thoughts in your head, made my stomach churn. "No," I said. "I'm just thinking for myself." She froze. That night, she upped my dosage without asking. I swapped the pills for sugar tablets I bought at a joke store. The next day, she said I looked better. I smiled and said, "Thanks." That week, I compiled a full digital folder with all fake documents. Photos of the attic pills, audio clips of her contradictions, the psychiatrist's official statement, timeline of inconsistencies since childhood. I titled it, "The Lie That Raised in Me." The truth wasn't just freeing. It was horrifying. I had no real memories untouched by manipulation. Even my favorite childhood movie, The Iron Giant, I later learned she let me watch only because it taught obedience. I kept seeing myself in mirrors and not recognizing the person. If I wasn't sick, who was I? If I wasn't dangerous, then why did everyone fear me? I wasn't just reclaiming the truth. I was rebuilding an identity from rubble. But now I had the truth, and I wasn't alone. And I was going to burn it all down. It wasn't a dramatic speech. There was no yelling, no breaking things. Just a table. 2 parents, 1 flash drive, and a sentence I'd rehearse 100 times. You lied to me for 15 years. I waited until dinner. Mom was making pasta. Dad was watching something muted on TV. I sat down, placed the flash drive on the table. They both looked up. What's this? She asked. My life, I said, but this time in my words. She didn't touch it. Her eyes narrowed. You been talking to someone? She said. Multiple people. I replied. Doctors, lawyers, survivors. My dad leaned forward, his face pale. Is this about your diagnosis? No, it's about your invention of one. She laughed, sharp, short. You think you know better than professionals? I slid the folder from the psychiatrist toward them. You aren't professionals, I said. I've seen your documents. Your fake letters, your printed out templates. Her face cracked. For the first time, I saw her real panic. You were unstable. You needed structure. We did what we had to. You drugged me with vitamins. You made up doctors. You forged forms. My voice rose now. You told people I was broken, dangerous, unfit. You took my future. Dad looked down. He didn't say a word. Mom's voice changed, became softer, almost childlike. I was scared. You were intense. I didn't know how else to protect you. I stood. No, you weren't protecting me. You were protecting your control. They begged me not to go public. Mom cried. Dad offered to talk to someone together. I told them I already had, and that the post was scheduled. Yes, I had written a Reddit post. In full detail, all names anonymized, but everything else, raw, real, documented. It wasn't a revenge post. It was a confession, a survival story, a war report. It was titled, My Parents Faked My Mental Illness for 15 Years. I Finally Found Out. It had photos, screenshots, dates, excerpts from fake logs. It went live at 8:15 p.m. By midnight, it had 42,000 upvotes. Comments poured in. This is textbook Munchausen by proxy. You are so strong for surviving this. I went through the same thing. You're not alone. Please publish this. This needs to be seen. I'm crying reading this. Thank you. Others were more practical. Here's a lawyer that specializes in this. Here's a therapist directory for survivors of medical abuse. Save every bit of documentation. CPS might get involved. And they did. Within 3 days, Child Protective Services contacted me privately. Apparently, my parents were still fostering a child, a 10-year-old girl. She was removed the next morning. A local journalist reached out. He read my post, asked for an interview. We met at a cafe. He brought tissues. I didn't cry. The piece was published the next week. The lie that raised me. How one man discovered his childhood was a diagnosis of control. It went viral again. News outlets picked it up. My story was translated into 4 languages. A podcast episode was dedicated to it. People from high school messaged me. Some apologized. Some said they always felt something was off. Some sent hate. You're embarrassing your family. Your mom gave up everything for you. I didn't respond. Because for once, I didn't know them anything. My dad lost his job. He sent me a long email filled with apologies and excuses. I read it. Never replied. My mom deleted all her. CP had shown up a week later. Not because of me, but because of her. Turns out my parents had signed up to be temporary foster guardians. They were helping a 10-year-old girl whose mother was in rehab. Her name was Lily. I'd only seen her twice. Quiet, polite, always carrying a pink notebook. When the caseworker knocked on our door and asked to speak with me privately, I didn't hesitate. I showed them everything. Lily was removed the next morning. The CPS agent looked me in the eye and said, "You may have just saved that little girl's life." The fallout came in waves. Wave 1. My dad was suspended from his job. He was a guidance counselor at high school. Someone forwarded them my Reddit post. The school launched a review. He never returned to work. Wave 2. My mom disappeared from the internet. Deleted every social media account. Friends she had known for decades stopped answering her calls. Wave 3. Family divided. Some said I was exaggerating, making things up for likes. Others, especially my cousin Jordan, reached out. He said, I always knew something was off. We weren't allowed to talk to you alone. The Reddit post reached over 2.5 million views in 5 days. Comments poured in. This broke me. Same thing happened to my sister. You're not alone. One message stood out. I'm a licensed therapist. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'll do it for free. You deserve that much. I cried for the first time in years. Eli, my friend from Oregon, flew out to visit. When he stepped off the train and hugged me, I froze. He said, you're safe now. That's when I really broke. I cried in his arms in front of dozens of strangers like a child. I moved out a month later. Found a small basement room in a shared apartment. The ceiling leaked when it rained. The heater groaned. The mattress was lumpy, but it was mine. For the first time in my life, no one watched me sleep. No one counted my pills. No one wrote notes about how I ate breakfast. I bought a cactus, named it Trusty. I kept it on the windowsill. Therapy started slow. At first, I just sat there in silence. My therapist, Elaine, never rushed me. She'd sip her tea and say, we don't have to talk about the past. We just have to make room for the present. Some weeks all I said was, I'm tired. That was okay too. Eventually, I brought in the notebooks. She read one page and closed it. You're not crazy, she said. You were conditioned to believe you were. I started learning words like gaslighting, enmeshment, psychological imprisonment, complex trauma. I started saying words like, I'm allowed to say no. I don't need permission to breathe. What happened wasn't my fault. I wrote pages and pages, then turned it into a blog, then a podcast. People listened. One woman sent me a recording of her own mother screaming about invisible conditions. Another man told me his parents used ADHD as an excuse to isolate him from the world. We called ourselves the Rebuilders. I began volunteering at a local shelter for abused teens. One kid, 13, barely spoke, stared at the floor for 3 sessions. Then one day he asked, did you have a locked room too? I nodded. He said, cool, and smiled. That smile meant everything. As for my parents, they moved. I think they live in a small town now. I don't know the name. I don't care. They sent one letter. No apology. Just confusion. We did our best. You were hard to raise. This is all a misunderstanding. I never responded, because I have no closure. Some days I still hear my mother's voice. Take your pills. You're not well. You'll hurt someone. But now I speak back. You were wrong. You needed me to be sick. But I'm not. Last month I stood in line at a planetarium, the one I always wanted to visit as a kid. I held my own ticket, wore my own hoodie, sat beside people who didn't know me. And when the lights dimmed and the stars appeared above me, I smiled. Because I finally understood something. I wasn't broken. I was never broken. I was just raised in a lie. And now, I'm free.